Welcome to the Cantankerous Catholic with Joe Sixpack, the every Catholic guy. Listen to Joe tackle the really tough moral issues, current events, and politics from a Catholic perspective. Now here's Joe Sixpack, the every Catholic guy.
Hello again, Sixpack warriors. Welcome back to the Cantankerous Catholic, episode 177. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. He descended into hell. On the third day he rose again from the dead. He ascended into heaven and sits at the right hand of God the Father Almighty. From thence he shall come to judge the living and the dead. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and life everlasting. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Gay Pride Month begins on June 1st. The next episode of the Cantankerous Catholic will also air on June 1st with the first annual Toxic Male Month. In this episode, I'm going to tell you what you can expect. If you're taking any prescription medication to control diabetes or even pre-diabetes, new studies from Italy and New Zealand show that type 2 diabetes and pre-diabetes can be managed or possibly even reversed if you know how. While most medications can keep the symptoms of diabetes at bay, they don't actually treat the root cause of the problem. So before you resign yourself to being hooked on medication for life, you've got to see a video about GLUCAFORT. The link is in my show notes. I've been taking GLUCAFORT for 2 months and it's had a dramatic effect on my blood sugar number. My primary care physician is amazed. So do what I did. Watch the video, then order the package of all-natural GLUCAFORT that's right for you by clicking the GLUCAFORT link in my show notes. Before we begin, I've got to give a hat tip to Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. As everyone knows by now, His Excellency finally barred House Speaker Nancy Pelosi from receiving communion in her home diocese. You may recall that I had a show in April calling the Archbishop the biggest coward in the USCCB because he kept insisting that Catholic politicians who support abortion should refrain from communion, yet he did absolutely nothing to stretch Pelosi. Well, he finally discovered his spine. Other bishops discovered their spines as well. I should say that 8 out of the 10 who supported the Archbishop did. Bishops Paprocki of Springfield, Illinois, and Strickland of Tyler, Texas, showed their courage on this issue years ago. Anyway, congratulations to the San Francisco Archbishop. It only took 10 years. Now let's get back to the topic of this episode. June 1st is the first annual Toxic Mail Month, and I'm going to tell you just exactly what you can expect. For starters, instead of the 5 episodes that June affords the Cantankerous Catholic, with all its episodes published on Wednesday, we're having 8 episodes for the month. I'd originally planned 10 episodes, but we experienced some pretty rough technical issues with 2 of the interviews, and I wasn't able to get those guests rescheduled in time to have them on the show for June. Episode 178 will publish on June 1st. Our guest will be Bishop Joseph Strickland. He leads the Diocese of Tyler, Texas. This is the second time I've had His Excellency on the show, and interviewing him the first time was a real pleasure. This time, though, was a lot different. Personally, I think it was the best interview I've ever had. If you listen to the Cantankerous Catholic for any length of time, you know I've been very critical of the Orthodox bishops in this country for being cowards. They haven't been willing to stand up to preach Catholic truth or to call out their brother bishops for their heresies and criminal activities. I've even called out Bishop Strickland by name for cowardice. Well, somewhere between 6 and 12 months ago, Bishop Strickland began to be a lot bolder. A little at first, but then much more courageous each time he spoke out. I guess he discovered that it's only scary the first time. Anyway, in this Toxic Mail Month interview, His Excellency pulled out all the stops. He was on fire. You definitely don't want to miss episode 178. Episode 179 will be on June 8th. We're going to have Father Robert Altier from the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis. We've had Father Altier on the show a couple of times before. He's my favorite priest in America, and it's always a deep pleasure to speak with him. Father is perhaps the most erudite priest I know. He's not only a no-holds-barred defender of the truth, but he's achieved that perfect balance of being able to tell you like it is with a demeanor that just tells you he's going to love you into heaven. Oh, and both priests and various bishops of his diocese have tried to make him a canceled priest, a badge of honor. Frankly, Father Altier's interview was so good that I really wanted to leave him to be the cleanup batter at the end of the month, but I just can't bring myself to allow any layman to go ahead of a bishop or priest of the living God. So you can expect Father Robert Altier on episode 179 on June 8th. This is another one you won't want to miss. Episode 180 will publish on June 10th. Our featured guest will be our good friend and a personal hero to many of you, Church Militant CEO Michael Voris. Michael has been on the Cantankerous Catholic multiple times. He's probably the easiest interview I do. He's like a television set. My questions are like the TV remote. When I want to change channels, I just ask another question, and Michael entertains until I change the channel again with another question. And in this interview, he isn't at all shy about the attack on Catholic masculinity by the whole LGBT agenda. Come to think of it, Michael isn't shy about anything. Episode 181 publishes on June 15th. We'll be having 2 guys on the show who've been here before, Bob Wilson and Brian Lee of the St. Paul Street Evangelization Apostolate. I've been a supporter of the St. Paul Street Evangelization Apostolate since I first heard of it. Bob and Brian are going to give you a rather unique perspective on Catholic masculinity from the evangelization angle. I want to mention something here now. The St. Paul Street Evangelization Apostolate enjoys the endorsement of such people as Raymond Leo Cardinal Burke, Francis Cardinal Lorenz, and apologist Jeff Cavins. They're rock solid in their orthodoxy, and they have something for everyone. Remember that I've told you over and over again that if you want to have a reasonable expectation of going to heaven when you die, there are 2 things you have to do. One of those things is to share the faith. That's the responsibility of every single Catholic, and there's no hope of salvation if you don't do it. The easiest way I know to learn how to evangelize and execute what you learn is through the St. Paul Street Evangelization Apostolate. Bob and Brian will help you to get started, so you don't want to miss episode 181 either. Episode 182 publishes on June 17th. Our guest will be Michael Jaquith. Michael is a Catholic life coach for men. Frankly, I was initially very turned off by the phrase Catholic life coach. I thought it sounded like something a con man might try to pull. Then Michael and I began chatting and getting to know each other. Turns out he's a convert who read his way into the church. Michael was a chemical engineer by educational training at the doctorate level. He's 100% Orthodox, and he helps Catholic men with pornography and sex addictions, substance abuse, personal and family finance, parenting issues, marital issues, and just about anything else you can think of. He has a unique take on Catholic masculinity and what it is to be a real man. Don't miss it. June 22nd is when we'll publish episode 183. This is a good episode for those who want to see what sort of young men are entering the seminary today. We'll be having Christopher McGurn, who will be entering seminary in August for the Diocese of Steubenville. From what I've been able to gather, Christopher is quite typical of the young men today seeking to become priests. I think you'll enjoy it. Episode 184 on June 24th holds what I think is one of the most special interviews of the month. We've had him on the show before, a young man named Joe Riggy. Here's what makes Joe so interesting and unique. He heads an apostolate called Our Warpath. It's an apostolate that focuses on young Catholics, and it's 100% Orthodox. In fact, I think it's so good that everyone should at least sign up for their newsletters. But what's so unique about Joe is that he heads this quickly growing and very professional apostolate while going to college full-time. Unless I'm mistaken, I'm going from memory here, Joe just graduated from high school in 2021. Joe Riggy is a classic example of Catholics doing something. He's not only trying to grow in holiness, but he's also sharing the faith any way he can. You won't want to miss episode 184. Our final show for Toxic Male Month is on June 29th. Episode 185 features an interview with Dr. Janet Smith. She's a retired Catholic professor who specializes in contraception and masculinity. In our interview, Dr. Smith had some really unique things to say that I'd never thought of before. I've been reading her articles and listening to her talks for decades. I really think you'll enjoy Dr. Janet Smith. The programming during Toxic Male Month will be a little different too. Due to the length of some of the interviews and the fact that I had to begin putting the audio files together and edit them well in advance of Toxic Male Month, the one feature we won't have is the Catholic News segment. None of the episodes will be able to have up-to-date news, so I'm leaving that out. I also want to tell you that a press release about Toxic Male Month went out the other day. The press release went to 15 Catholic news sources in this country and the UK, and over 500 major news sources in America, Canada, and the UK. As a consequence of trying to put out this press release, the Cantankerous Catholicwe actually earned a badge of honor. It seems that one press release aggregator refused to send the release because it wasn't LGBT friendly. I had to laugh when that happened. I guess that puts me further on the radar for Biden's disinformation miscreants. Since this is the last week before Toxic Male Month, I want to remind you that we have Toxic Male Month coffee mugs and t-shirts for both men and women on the CantankerousCatholic.com swag page. No, forget about this being a reminder. I'm actually begging you to get your mugs and t-shirts. Sixpack warriors need to promote Toxic Male Month, and these mugs and t-shirts are the very best way to do it locally. So go to CantankerousCatholic.com right now. Go to the swag page and order your mugs and t-shirts. Some six-pack warriors have already bought theirs, and they're reporting all sorts of interest from the people who see their mugs and t-shirts. I fully expect that next year's Toxic Mail Month will be even bigger because of the interest being generated by you Sixpack warriors, and I thank you for it. We'll see you on June 1st for Toxic Mail Month. The lockdowns over the last 2 years have changed the way people earn or want to earn a living. A lot of people are wanting to set up online businesses for themselves in e-commerce. The problem is, most folks have no earthly idea how to start, and all the videos on YouTube that are supposed to tell you how to begin just whet your appetite. Well, now you can get the help you need. Peter Prue, a successful e-commerce entrepreneur, is the founder of eCommerce Empire Builder Academy. He's offering a free webinar that explains how he's made a full-time living in e-commerce and what his academy's all about. So if you want to learn how to set up an online e-commerce business, click the link in my show notes that says eCommerce Empire Builder Academy and register for the free webinar.
Joe Sixpack, the Every Catholic Guy, wants to make sure you're informed about all the Catholic news you need to know. Here's Joe Sixpack's top 5 Catholic news picks for this episode. Catholic news pick number 5.
Hats off to Newsbusters. Liberal comedian Bill Maher on Friday confronted LGBT movement leaders for pushing puberty blockers and other dangerous medical interventions on children. It's okay to ask questions about something that's very new and involves children, said Maher, who hosts a popular weekly HBO show. We're literally experimenting on children, he said, citing scientific studies that have found giving puberty blockers to children hinders the development of bone density and can render patients infertile. Weighing trade-offs is not bigotry, he said.
That's what I'm talking about.
You can read the whole story by clicking the link in my show notes.
Catholic news pick number 4.
Hats off to Fox News. Robbie Mook, who served as Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, testified last week that Clinton approved disseminating the now debunked story about Donald Trump having ties to the Kremlin. Mook revealed that, although the Clinton camp did not verify the story, Clinton personally agreed to disseminate it. I don't remember the substance of the conversation, but notionally the discussion was, hey, we have this and we want to share it with a reporter, Mook said.
Busted!
You can read the whole story by clicking the link in my show notes.
Catholic news pick number 3.
Hats off to the Daily Wire. U.S. Air Force Academy spokesman Dean Miller announced last week that 3 graduate cadets will not be commissioned into the United States Air Force as long as they remain unvaccinated. A 4th cadet had refused to submit to the shot until graduation neared this year. The cadet relented in order to receive a commission. Miller added that a decision on whether to require the 3 to reimburse the United States for education costs in lieu of service will be made by the Secretary of the Air Force, the Associated Press reported.
You're an idiot!
You can read the whole story by clicking the link in my show notes.
Catholic news pick number 2.
Hats off to the Washington Examiner. Pretender Joe Biden told reporters last week that new outbreaks of monkeypox should be concerning to all and promised his administration is working on making a vaccine available. Monkeypox is something that everyone should be concerned about, he said. It is a concern that if it were to spread, it would be consequential. I wonder what that means. There are currently fewer than 100 confirmed cases of this disease worldwide.
You big dummy!
You can read the whole story by clicking the link in my show notes.
Catholic news pick number 1.
Hats off to Fox News. White House COVID-19 response coordinator Dr. Ashish Jha still supports indoor mask mandates. When you're in indoor space, you should be wearing a mask, Jha told interviewers last week. I feel that very strongly that in crowded indoor spaces, in places with high transmission, people should be doing that.
Why, you must be delusional or something.
You can read the whole story by clicking the link in my show notes. The COVID lockdowns and mandates hurt everyone financially. Nearly all of you lost money and many lost their jobs. I learned this in email conversations with some of you. I learned that many of you are looking for ways to avoid financial worries when this happens again, and make no mistake that the tyrants in government will make sure it happens again. The number of Americans searching for ways to earn an income online has exploded. Some need to replace the jobs they lost. Others want to build an online income to be prepared for when it happens again. Some just want the freedom from being threatened financially again. Stay-at-home moms want to supplement the household income without working outside the home. I get it. The problem is the average person has no earthly idea where to start. I've been spending countless hours researching ways to earn an online income with the help of some friends. I've come up with a bevy of income avenues and reputable courses to help you. Consequently, I've come up with a separate email list for people who want this information. When I gave this opportunity to people on my other email list, the response was overwhelming. So if you want to get the valuable information I'm collecting about how to make money online, just click on the link in my show notes that says, "Show me how to make money." I'll begin helping you right away.
I am hard, but I am fair.
It's time for the Catholic Boot Camp with your drill sergeant, Joe Sixpack, the Every Catholic Guy. Learn the Catholic faith and how to defend it like you've never heard it before. This boot camp is tough, so there's no political correctness, no spirit of Vatican II, and no namby-pamby platitudes. Drill Sergeant Joe Sixpack, the Every Catholic Guy, will prepare you for spiritual war. Now here's Joe Sixpack.
Sometimes members of our American hierarchy tell Catholics what they want to hear rather than tell them the truth. Bishop Robert Barron, Auxiliary of Los Angeles, is one such bishop. He's been quoted as saying that everyone has a reasonable expectation of going to heaven. In an interview with Ben Shapiro, he made it even worse. Shapiro told the bishop that he was an observant Jew and that he obeyed all the various Jewish laws. Then he asked Bishop Barron whether he was saved or damned. Bishop Barron very wrongly told Shapiro that Jesus is just the privileged way to get to heaven. Catholics are notorious for not reading the Bible. Apparently, Bishop Barron is one such Catholic. His Excellency openly contradicts the things that Jesus said about this. In John 14:6, Jesus said, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." I'm not the most highly educated man in the world, but my reading comprehension is pretty good. After all, I went clean through college. Well, most of the time I was clean. Anyway, I see absolutely nothing in what Jesus said that he's the privileged way to heaven. What I read indicates that Jesus is the only way. His Excellency has said that everyone has a reasonable expectation of going to heaven. Yet Jesus said quite the opposite in Matthew 17:13 and 14 when he said, "Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few." That doesn't sound like everyone has a reasonable chance of going to heaven to me. Do you read this any differently? Bishop Barron is a mere man, but Jesus is God himself. So who would you prefer to believe? Certainly we all have an emotional desire to believe Bishop Barron, which is evidence that you can't trust your emotions because emotions will betray you every time. Our reason and intellect tell us we need to believe what the God-man Jesus Christ taught us. What he made crystal clear in Matthew, do most people not have a reasonable expectation of going to heaven, but most people actually have a reasonable expectation of going to hell. Why am I picking on Bishop Barron? Well, there are two reasons. The first is that when a bishop espouses heresy, he should be called out for it. Both St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas tell us so. And of course, Paul gives us an example of that when he confronted Peter. So it's a good and just thing to tell the bishop he's wrong when he teaches something that isn't true. The other reason is to make a point that every Catholic layperson needs to understand. Over the last 6 decades, the Catholic catechesis in this country has been little better than teaching Protestantism. Bishops like Barron have cheated you out of the bare minimum of the Church's teachings. The faith has been stolen from you. I seriously doubt that more than 2% of those who are listening to this can actually pass a simple basic catechism exam. Yeah, I've heard it all before.
Joe, I'll have you know I went through 8 years of Catholic school.
Okay, but the Catholic schools are exactly where the dumbed-down catechesis began. Even if you spent 12 years in Catholic school, if you're under 80 years old, you most likely haven't been taught the Catholic faith. If Catholics had been taught the faith over the last 5 decades, current statistics from surveys where Catholic laity told on themselves wouldn't be so dismal. According to those surveys, 74% of Catholics don't believe the Eucharist is the actual body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ. 82% reject one or more doctrines of Catholicism. 54% believe abortion, euthanasia, and physician-assisted suicide are acceptable, and nearly 98% of Catholic couples use contraception. This means that only 26% rightly believe in the Eucharist, only 18% accept everything in the Church's constant 2,000-year teaching, and only 46% accept that murder, abortion, euthanasia, etc., is evil. The entire world is in the worst shape it's ever been in. The Catholic Church is in the worst shape she's ever been in. It's not like we can escape the world, nor can we leave the Catholic Church because she's divinely instituted. We're morally obligated to remain Catholic. Our only option is to become newly and wholly committed to Jesus Christ and His truths, then defend and advance these truths to others as Jesus commands. How do we do that? We begin by committing ourselves unwaveringly to Jesus Christ. Then we learn the Catholic faith as best we can. After all, you can't live, defend, and promote what you don't know. There are several options for learning the Catholic faith, as you should. One is to read and study the Catechism of the Catholic Church, but that's a pretty arduous task. The second way is to begin a course of study from a competent source. In that regard, I only know of one trustworthy study course. That would be the Basic Catechism course written by servant of God, Father John A. Hardin, for the Marian Catechist Apostolate. I recommend it highly, but it costs money and it's intended as the first course of study for those who are striving to become Marian catechists themselves. In other words, it's not for the faint of heart. But you can get it by clicking the link in my show notes that says Marian Catechist Apostolate Basic Course. The third way to learn the faith is really sort of twofold. When I began this apostolate, I wrote an email course. You can get it for free, and each short lesson arrives in your inbox every 3 days. The way you can get it is to go to my show notes and click on the link that says, I want to learn more about the Catholic Church. And that leads to the second fold. Once you sign up for the email course, you'll also begin to receive invitations to attend a free weekly webinar in the Sharing the Catholic Faith series. I teach this in real time over any internet-connected device. If you can't attend the live session, you can watch the recorded video of the webinar, provided that you registered for the webinar in the first place. Sign up now for the free email course in my show notes. Claim for yourself what you've been cheated of for over 60 years. Have you ever really explored the Cantankerous Catholic website? Did you know that I have 6 of my own books available there? Did you know that I have t-shirts, sweatshirts, and coffee mugs available? You can accomplish 3 things when you buy some of my swag. Your purchase helps to support this apostolate, you'll have something to display that says you're a six-pack warrior, and you'll look just plain cool. How many Catholic apostolates can make you look cool? Click on the Joe's Stuff tab at CantankerousCatholic.com today. Let the world know you're a cool six-pack warrior. The Catholic Church is 2,000 years old. A lot of wisdom is gained over 2 millennia. Each week we'll share some of that wisdom with a Catholic quote. So here's this week's Catholic quote. This week's Catholic quote is from St. Catherine of Siena. She said, "The devil fears hearts on fire with love of God." I believe a really great way to teach the faith is through stories, parables, and anecdotes. So here's today's story. Many years ago, a ship was wrecked off the Irish coast. The captain had the reputation of being a very cautious man, nor was the weather so stormy that it explained the immense distance that the ship had swerved from her proper course. Accordingly, when the ship went down, there was so much interest in the disaster that a diver went below to determine, if possible, the cause of the wreck. Among other things, the diver brought back to the surface the ship's compass. Inside the compass box, they found a tiny bit of steel, which appeared to be the tip of a knife blade. They concluded and later confirmed that the day before the wreck, a sailor had been tasked with cleaning the compass. In digging out some dirt, he had used his pocket knife and had unknowingly broken off the very point and left it in the box. That little bit of the knife blade was enough to throw off the compass by 1 degree and cause the shipwreck. This is a picture of venial sin. Even the smallest sin deflects the soul from its course toward God and affects the conscience, which is the soul's compass. Such sins even sometimes wreck the soul. Avoid venial sin even though it's a less serious offense against the law of God, but it isn't a slight matter. Venial sin doesn't cause spiritual death, but rather spiritual sickness and laziness.
This has been The Cantankerous Catholic with Joe Sixpack, the Every Catholic Guy. Thanks for subscribing, and be sure to visit CantankerousCatholic.com to get your free copy of Joe's popular book, The Best of What We Believe, Why We Believe It.